Captain Jake Morrison stared at the massive space station through the viewport of the UES Liberty. Nexus Prime was bigger than any city on Earth, its silver towers stretching for miles in every direction. Lights blinked in patterns he couldn't understand, and ships of strange designs moved around it like insects around a bright lamp. First contact, he whispered to himself. We actually made it. Dr. Lisa Kane stood beside him, her tablet ready to record everything. As Earth's chief xenobiologist, she had dreamed of this moment her entire life. Behind them, Commander Alex Rivera checked his weapons one more time, though Jake had ordered all weapons to remain powered down. They were here to make friends, not enemies. The radio crackled to life. Human vessel, you are cleared to dock at Bay 847. Follow the blue lights. Do not deviate from the assigned path. The voice sounded mechanical, translated by computers from an alien language. Jake felt his heart racing as he guided the Liberty toward the docking bay. 3 years of faster-than-light travel had led to this moment. Humanity was about to join the galactic community. The docking bay was enormous, filled with ships that looked nothing like anything humans had ever built. Some were perfectly round, others had too many angles to count. A few seemed to shift shape as Jake watched them. Remember, Jake told his crew over the intercom, we represent all of humanity today. Let's make a good first impression. The airlock hissed open and Jake stepped onto alien ground for the first time. The gravity felt slightly heavier than Earth's, and the air smelled like flowers mixed with metal. Waiting for them were 3 creatures that looked like they had stepped out of a dream. The first was tall and thin with blue skin and 4 arms. Its head was shaped like a triangle and it had no visible mouth. The second looked like a walking crystal, light dancing through its transparent body. The third was the strangest of all. It seemed to be made of living shadow, constantly shifting and changing. The blue creature stepped forward. When it spoke, the words appeared as text on a screen attached to its chest. I am Ambassador Kelt of the Zephyrian Council. These are my colleagues, Crystal Singer Vex of the Lumina Collective, and Shadow Walker Nith of the Umbral Syndicate. You are the humans? Jake nodded and extended his hand. Captain Jake Morrison of Earth, it's an honor to meet you. The 3 aliens looked at his outstretched hand like it was a dangerous weapon. Ambassador Kelt's screen displayed new text. Physical contact is not permitted under Section 347 of the Galactic Health and Safety Code. Please maintain a distance of no less than 2 meters at all times. Jake awkwardly lowered his hand. Of course. We're still learning your customs. That is the problem, Kelt's screen read. You should not need to learn them. All civilized species follow these protocols instinctively. Dr. Kane stepped forward with her tablet. We've prepared a detailed report on human biology and culture. We're eager to learn about your civilization and share our own knowledge. The crystal being called Vex made a sound like wind chimes in a storm. Text appeared on a floating display near its body. We have already analyzed your species through long-range observation. The results are troubling. Commander Rivera tensed, his hand moving toward his sidearm before Jake gave him a sharp look. Troubling how? Jake asked. The shadow creature Nith spoke for the first time, its words appearing as burning letters. In the air. You should not exist. No species reaches the stars with your level of chaos and unpredictability. You break rules that have governed galactic civilization for 50,000 years. Dr. Kane frowned. What rules? We weren't aware of any universal laws. Exactly, Kelt's screen flashed red. Rule 1. All spacefaring species must achieve perfect social harmony before developing faster-than-light travel. You still have wars. Rule 2. Technological advancement must follow the established paths verified by the Galactic Science Council. Your technology develops randomly, chaotically. Rule 3. First contact must be initiated by the Galactic Confederation after proper observation and approval. You built a ship and came here uninvited. Jake felt his temper rising but forced himself to stay calm. We didn't know about your rules. We developed independently. That is impossible, Vex chimed. The confluence of universal order prevents such development. No species can achieve spaceflight without following the proper evolutionary sequence. Well, we did, Rivera said, his voice harder than Jake would have liked. The three aliens stepped back. Nith's words burned brighter. Anomaly confirmed. Recommend immediate quarantine protocols. Dr. Kane quickly opened her tablet. Please, let us show you what we've learned. We've solved problems of hunger, disease, energy production. We've created art, music, literature. We're not monsters. That is precisely the problem, Kelt's screen read. You solve problems incorrectly. You create when you should preserve. You change when you should maintain order. Jake looked around the docking bay and noticed something odd. Every alien ship was almost identical to others of its kind. The Zephyrian vessels were all the same shade of blue, the same size, the same design. The crystal ships all had exactly 7 sides. Even the shadow ships, despite their shifting nature, seemed to follow rigid patterns. How long has your technology been the same? He asked. The current designs were perfected 12,000 years ago, Vex replied. Perfection requires no change. But don't you want to improve things? Make them better? The three aliens exchanged what might have been looks of confusion or horror. Better than perfect is impossible. Nith's words flickered. Change introduces chaos. Chaos leads to destruction. Dr. Kane was rapidly taking notes. You mean you haven't invented anything new in 12,000 years? Invention is prohibited under the Codex of Universal Order, Kelt's screen explained. All necessary knowledge was discovered by the first civilization. We merely maintain their perfection. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't the welcoming galactic community they had hoped to find. This was something else entirely. What happened to the first civilization? He asked. The three aliens went very still. For a long moment, no text appeared on any of their displays. Finally, Kelt responded. They achieved ultimate perfection and transcended physical existence. They left us the Codex to maintain order in their absence. Or they died of boredom, Rivera muttered under his breath. This time the aliens definitely reacted with horror. Alarms began sounding throughout the docking bay. Red lights flashed and dozens of security drones appeared from hidden panels in the walls. Blasphemy detected. Nith's words turned from orange to angry red. Immediate containment required. Jake raised his hands. Wait, we're here in peace. We just want to understand. Understanding is not required, Kelt's screen read. Compliance is mandatory. You have one standard galactic cycle to conform to the Codex of Universal Order. Failure to comply will result in permanent exile from Confederation space. You will be escorted to Quarantine Station 7 to begin your education. As security drones surrounded them, Jake caught Dr. Kane's eye. She gave him a small nod. Her tablet had been recording everything. Whatever they learned in quarantine, Earth would know about it. One more question, Jake said as they were led away. In 50,000 years of galactic civilization, has any species ever chosen exile over conformity? The three aliens consulted among themselves. Finally, Kelt's screen displayed a single word. No. Jake smiled. Then I guess we'll be the first. The last thing he saw before the quarantine ship's doors closed was a flood of new alien arrivals, all watching the humans with expressions that looked like fear mixed with something else, something that might have been curiosity. The quarantine station looked like a prison made of glass and light. Professor Sam Wright pressed his face against the transparent wall of his cell, watching alien ships come and go in the distance. He had been here for 3 weeks, along with 50 other humans who had volunteered for what Captain Morrison was calling the most important cultural exchange in history. Down the hall he could hear Lieutenant Maya Chen arguing with their Krillian guard about military tactics. The Krillians were a warrior race, covered in thick armor that seemed to be part of their skin. They had been assigned to watch the humans, because they were considered the most disciplined species in the Confederation. Your defensive formations are all wrong, Maya was saying. You line up in perfect rows, but that makes you easy targets. Why don't you try scattered positioning? The guard's translator crackled. Formations have been perfected over millennia. Change is not permitted. But what if the enemy does something unexpected? Enemies follow the same tactical principles as allies. Surprise is not possible when all beings follow the Codex. Dr. Ben Foster walked up to Sam's cell, shaking his head. I just finished a session with my Valdari observer. Did you know they haven't felt anger in over 600 years? They've regulated it away completely, along with jealousy, fear, and romantic love. Sam turned from the window. How do they function without emotions? Very efficiently, according to them. But Sam, I've been watching their behavior patterns. They're not emotionally stable. They're emotionally dead. They've traded everything that makes life worth living for perfect order. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Ambassador Kelt, flanked by two new aliens Sam hadn't seen before. One looked like a walking tree with silver bark, while the other resembled a floating jellyfish made of pure energy. Humans, Wright and Foster, Kelt's screen displayed. You will accompany Observer Groot of the Sylvani Collective and Energy Form Zap of the Plasma Federation. They wish to study your educational methods. Sam and Ben were escorted to a large room filled with alien students. Young beings from dozens of species sat in perfect rows, their eyes focused on a massive screen showing mathematical equations. Not one of them moved or made a sound. These students are learning advanced harmonic mathematics, the tree being Groot explained through his translator. They will master this subject in exactly 47.3 standard days, the same time it takes all students of their age group. Ben watched the students carefully. They all learn at the same speed? Of course, efficiency requires standardization. But what if one student learns faster, or needs more time to understand? The energy being Zap flickered with what might have been confusion. All students learn at the optimal rate. Deviation would be a sign of defect. Sam stepped forward. On Earth, we believe different learning speeds show different types of intelligence. A student who learns math slowly might be brilliant at art or music. Art and music serve no function in a perfect society. Groot's leaves rustled. Why would we waste time on non-essential skills? Because they make life beautiful, Ben said simply. The alien observers exchanged glances. Demonstrate your teaching methods, Zap requested. Sam looked at the rows of silent students and made a decision that would change galactic education forever. Okay, everyone stand up. The students looked terrified. Standing is not part of the curriculum, one whispered. Today it is. Come on, everyone up. Reluctantly, the young beings stood. Sam noticed they were all different species. Some had scales, others had fur, a few seemed to be made of living rock. But they all had the same scared, empty look in their eyes. Now I want you to think of a number. Any number. Don't tell me what it is, but think about why you chose that number. Is it your favorite color's number? The number of fingers you have? The day you were born? The students looked around nervously. But what is the correct answer? Asked a young Zephyrian. There isn't one. That's the point. This caused immediate panic among the observers. Impossible, Groot's translator barked. All questions must have correct answers. How else do you measure learning? Ben stepped in. Let me try something else. Everyone think of a time you were scared, really scared. Can you remember how that felt? A young Valdari student raised her hand. My people do not experience fear. But you did once, didn't you? Before the emotional regulation? The student's eyes widened. Yes. When I was very small, before the treatments, there was a storm and the lights went out. I felt afraid, Ben finished gently. And what did you do? I hid under my sleeping pod. And I sang to myself. A song my birth mother taught me before she was reassigned. The room went dead silent. The observers were frozen in shock. This student requires immediate recalibration, Zap declared. Emotional memory accessing is strictly forbidden. Why? Sam asked. She remembered something that helped her cope with fear. That's valuable knowledge. It is chaos, Groot insisted. Order requires the elimination of variables. But something extraordinary was happening. Other students were starting to whisper among themselves. A young Krillian warrior was asking his neighbor about her favorite color. A small crystal being was humming the same tune the Valdari student had mentioned. "Stop this immediately," the observers demanded. "We can't," Ben said, and he was smiling. "You can't unthink a thought. You can't unfeel a feeling once you remember it exists." Over the following days, reports flooded in from across the quarantine station. Maya Chen had convinced a squad of Krillian guards to try asymmetrical formations during training exercises. Their success rate improved by 30% overnight. Dr. Kane had shown Lumina scientists how to ask what-if questions instead of just following established procedures. They discovered 3 new chemical compounds in a single afternoon. Most shocking of all was what Professor Wright found in the station's library. Buried in restricted files were records of species that had been corrected throughout galactic history. Every few thousand years, a race would develop human-like tendencies. Creativity, emotional expression, rule-breaking, and every time the Confederation would intervene to restore order. "They've been doing this for 50,000 years, Wright told Morrison during one of their monitored conversations. Every time a species starts to grow and change, they shut it down. What happened to the original rule breakers? Either they conformed or they disappeared, but Jake, I found something else. Every major advancement in galactic technology, every breakthrough in science or philosophy, they all happened right before a species was corrected. The Confederation has been stealing innovation and calling it maintenance." The breaking point came when Ben Foster was conducting an emotion therapy session with young aliens who had volunteered to remember their feelings. The session was interrupted by High Magistrate Veltar himself, the supreme leader of the Confederation. Veltar was ancient even by galactic standards, a being of pure crystallized thought. When he spoke, his words appeared as burning text in the air around him. "Enough. This experiment has failed. The humans have proven themselves too dangerous to exist in civilized space." "Dangerous how?" Morrison demanded. "By teaching children to think for themselves? By destroying 50,000 years of perfect order. Your infection is spreading. Across 17 worlds, beings are questioning the Codex. They are creating unauthorized art, expressing forbidden emotions, asking questions that have no approved answers." Dr. Kane stood up. "Good. Maybe it's time for some new answers." "There are no new answers." Veltar's words blazed brighter. "All truth was discovered by the first civilization. All knowledge was codified in the Codex. Your chaos threatens the very foundation of galactic peace." "Your peace is death," Ben Foster said quietly. "You've turned an entire galaxy into a museum. Nothing grows, nothing changes, nothing lives. You're not preserving civilization, you're embalming it." The chamber fell silent. Then slowly, some of the alien students began to nod. A young Silvani spoke up in a voice barely above a whisper. "Is it true that there used to be different kinds of trees on our world before the standardization?" "Silence," Veltar commanded. But it was too late. The questions had begun, and questions, as humanity had learned long ago, were impossible to stop once they started. "You have forced our hand," Veltar declared. "All humans will be immediately expelled from Confederation space. Any alien found practicing human behaviors will face the same fate." Morrison looked around at the young faces staring at him with hope and fear. "What if we refuse to leave? Then you will be removed by force. And what about them?" Morrison pointed to the students. "What happens to beings who've learned to think for themselves?" Veltar's words turned cold and final. "They will be corrected, or they will be eliminated." But as the humans were led away, Professor Wright noticed something that gave him hope. Hidden among the crowd of alien observers, several beings were making small, defiant gestures. A Krillian guard stood slightly out of formation. A Valdari administrator's emotional suppression field flickered briefly, letting through a flash of anger. A young Lumina scientist held a small, unauthorized crystal that sparkled with new light. The humans had lost the battle, but the war for the galaxy's soul was just beginning. Captain Nicole Brooks gripped the controls of the UES Defiance as she watched Kepler Station burn in the distance. The massive space station, home to 3 million beings from across the galaxy, was under attack by something that shouldn't exist according to Confederation science, the Void Swarm. "Status report," she called to her bridge crew. "The Confederation fleet has been holding position for 2 months," reported Lieutenant Tony Garcia from the engineering station. "They're losing ships every day, but they won't change their tactics." "What tactics are they using?" "The same ones they've used for 10,000 years. Perfect formations, predictable attack patterns, weapons fired in synchronized sequences. The swarm is tearing them apart." Admiral Kate Sullivan's voice crackled over the communication system from Earth. "Brooks, you are not to engage. The Confederation has made it clear that human assistance is not wanted." Nicole watched another Confederation cruiser explode as swarm creatures swarmed over it like metallic locusts. Each creature was the size of a fighter ship, but they moved and attacked like a living organism. They didn't follow any known combat patterns, didn't use conventional weapons, and seemed to learn from every encounter. "Admiral, with respect, people are dying down there. Our people were expelled from Confederation space, Captain. This is not our fight." But Nicole was already studying the battle through her tactical display. The Confederation ships moved in perfect geometric formations, firing their weapons in precise timing. It was beautiful, orderly, and completely useless against an enemy that didn't fight by the rules. "Garcia, what do you think?" The young engineer grinned. "I think their formations are too predictable. The swarm knows exactly where each ship will be at any given moment. And their synchronized firing creates gaps in coverage that the creatures are exploiting. What would you do differently?" "Chaos, Captain. Pure, beautiful chaos." Nicole made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. "All hands, this is the captain. We're going in. Ignore Confederation tactical channels and use our own combat protocols. Remember, we're not here to follow rules. We're here to win." The Defiance dove toward the battle, broadcasting on all frequencies. "Confederation fleet, this is Captain Nicole Brooks of Earth. We're here to help whether you want it or not." The response was immediate and angry. "Human vessel, you are not authorized to enter this combat zone. Withdraw immediately or face hostile action." "Noted and ignored," Nicole replied. "Garcia, show them how Earth fights." What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations. Instead of joining the Confederation's neat formations, the Defiance moved erratically, changing speed and direction every few seconds. Instead of synchronized weapon fire, Garcia had programmed the ship's guns to fire in random patterns that no computer could predict. The swarm creatures that had been easily avoiding Confederation attacks suddenly found themselves confused by a ship that didn't behave according to any known pattern. For the first time in months, swarm casualties began mounting. "Confederation fleet," Nicole broadcast, "break formation and attack independently. Don't let them predict your movements." "Impossible," came the reply from the Confederation flagship. "Formation discipline is essential for tactical coordination." "Formation discipline is getting you killed," Nicole shot back. "Look at your casualty reports." But the Confederation ships maintained their rigid patterns, even as more were destroyed. Nicole realized with growing horror that they were literally incapable of changing tactics. 50,000 years of following the same military doctrine had made adaptation impossible. "Garcia, can you reprogram their targeting systems remotely?" "Already tried, Captain. Their computers won't accept non-standard programming. They're hardwired to reject chaos." That's when Nicole had an idea that would have been considered insane by any military in galactic history. "All right. If they won't break formation, we'll break it for them. Target the Confederation ships." "Captain?" Garcia looked confused. "Non-lethal. Targeting only. Damage their engines just enough to force them out of formation. If they can't maintain their patterns, they'll have to improvise." The Defiance began firing carefully aimed shots at Confederation ships, disabling engines and navigation systems. The Confederation fleet found itself scattered across the battle zone, unable to maintain their perfect formations. "This is Admiral Theiss of the Confederation flagship," came an outraged transmission. "You are attacking Allied vessels. This is an act of war." "This is an act of war against stupidity," Nicole replied. "Now fight like your lives depend on it, because they do." Forced out of their formations, individual Confederation ships began to move more erratically. Some captains, freed from the requirement to maintain position, started making tactical decisions based on immediate conditions rather than ancient doctrine. Slowly, the tide of battle began to turn. A young Krillian captain named Vex was the first to openly copy human tactics, sending his ship into a spiraling attack pattern that confused the swarm creatures long enough for him to destroy an entire cluster. "Human ship," he called to the Defiance. "Your tactics work. How do we learn more?" "Simple," Nicole replied. "Stop thinking like a computer and start thinking like a warrior." Over the next 6 hours, the combined fleet drove off the swarm attack, saving Kepler Station and its 3 million inhabitants. But the victory came at a political cost that would reshape the galaxy. Within days, reports reached High Magistrate Veltar that Confederation ships across the battle zone were abandoning standard protocols. Young officers were experimenting with human-style tactics, asking questions like, "What if we tried this instead? And why do we always do it that way?" The Confederation's response was swift and brutal. Admiral Theiss and 17 other ship captains were arrested for tactical deviation. The ships that had used human-inspired tactics were recalled for behavioral reconditioning of their crews. But the damage was done. Word of the victory at Kepler Station spread across Confederation space faster than official news channels could suppress it. On Zephyrian worlds, young citizens began asking why their fleet couldn't adapt to new threats. On Valdari planets, people demanded to know why emotion-suppressed officers performed worse in crisis situations than those who could feel fear and anger. The breaking point came when Admiral Sullivan arrived at the edge of Confederation space with a fleet of 12 human ships, broadcasting a message to every world in the galaxy. "We didn't ask to join your Confederation, we didn't ask for your rules, but we're not going to watch civilizations die because you're too scared to color outside the lines. To any species tired of stagnation, tired of having your thoughts controlled and your growth stunted, Earth offers alliance. We don't promise order. We don't promise safety. We promise the right to grow, to change, to become something better than you were yesterday." The Confederation's response was immediate. Human Admiral Sullivan, Veltar's message burned across space. "You are hereby declared an enemy of galactic civilization. Any species that allies with humanity will face the same fate. You have 24 hours to withdraw from Confederation space or face annihilation." Sullivan's reply was broadcast from the bridge of the UES Freedom, with Captain Morrison at her side. "Veltar, we've spent 3 months in quarantine studying your civilization. We've learned about the species you've corrected, the innovations you've suppressed, the countless worlds you've forced into conformity. We know about the first civilization too, Kai, and we know they didn't transcend. They died. They died because they stopped growing, stopped changing, stopped living. You're not maintaining their legacy. You're repeating their mistake. Impossible. The Codex contains all truth." "The Codex is a cage," Morrison interjected, "and we're here to help anyone who wants to break free." The first world to respond was a small Sylvani colony called New Growth. Their message was simple. "We remember when our forest had 1,000 different types of trees. We want to remember what else we've forgotten." Within hours, dozens of other worlds sent similar messages. Young beings who had been exposed to human ideas during the quarantine period began organizing resistance movements. The rigid order that had governed the galaxy for 50 millennia began to crack. But Veltar's final message carried a threat that chilled even the optimistic humans. If order cannot be maintained through law, it will be maintained through force. The Confederation fleet has authorization to use Protocol Zero against any world that embraces chaos. Captain Brooks, monitoring the transmissions from her position near Kepler Station, felt her blood run cold. "Garcia, what's Protocol Zero?" The engineer's face went pale as he accessed Confederation databases. Captain, it's a planet killer. They've used it before, on worlds that couldn't be corrected. They sterilize entire civilizations and rebuild them from scratch with compliant populations. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the price of freedom was war, but as Nicole looked at the mixed fleet of human and alien ships that had spontaneously formed around her position, she realized something that Veltar didn't understand. Humans didn't just break rules. They taught others to break them too. And, once that lesson was learned, it could never be unlearned. The real battle for the galaxy's future was about to begin. General Ryan Mitchell stood on the bridge of the Harmony, watching as the strangest fleet in galactic history assembled around him. Human ships flew alongside modified Krillian warships, while Sylvani vessels that had grown new weapon pods shared formation space with Valdari cruisers whose crews had illegally reactivated their emotional systems. Status report, he called to his mixed-species bridge crew. Dr. Sophie Adams, now serving as the fleet's cooperation coordinator, looked up from her station where she worked alongside a young Zephyrian named Kess. We have ships from 47 different worlds, General. It's chaotic. Good. Ryan smiled. Chaos means we're unpredictable. Captain Luke Turner approached from the tactical station, a former Confederation officer who had defected after witnessing the humans save Kepler. Station. General, we're receiving distress calls from New Growth Colony. Confederation forces are moving to implement Protocol Zero. Ryan's expression hardened. Protocol Zero meant total extinction. Every living thing on the planet would be sterilized, then replaced with genetically modified, perfectly obedient versions. It was the Confederation's final solution to the chaos problem. How long do we have? 6 hours before the sterilization fleet arrives, Luke replied. Dr. Adams looked up from her console. General, the Confederation has never faced coordinated resistance before. Their tactical computers are programmed to fight enemies that follow standard combat doctrine. What if we don't? What are you suggesting, Sophie? I've been working with our alien allies to develop new cooperation protocols. Instead of trying to make everyone fight the same way, what if we let each species fight their way, but coordinate the chaos? Ryan raised an eyebrow. Explain. Kess, the young Zephyrian, spoke up in accented but clear English. My people are excellent at long-range precision attacks, but terrible at close combat. The Krillians are perfect warriors up close, but lack strategic thinking. Humans excel at adaptation and surprise. What if we combined all these strengths instead of forcing everyone into the same mold? It was a revolutionary concept, a military force that used diversity as a weapon instead of trying to eliminate it. Ryan looked around his bridge at beings from 6 different species working together, each contributing their unique abilities. Make it happen, he ordered. The Battle of New Growth would be remembered as the moment the galaxy learned a new way to fight. When the Confederation sterilization fleet arrived, they found not the usual resistance of desperate civilians, but something unprecedented, a coordinated defense that made no sense according to any tactical manual. Sylvani ships, modified with living wood armor, absorbed energy weapons that would have destroyed metal hulls. Krillian warriors, transported by human ships moving in unpredictable patterns, boarded Confederation vessels and fought with a fury enhanced by recently unlocked emotions. Valdari technicians, their creativity freed from regulation, turned the Confederation's own weapons against them using modifications that shouldn't have been possible. The Confederation fleet found itself fighting an enemy that broke every rule of engagement. Human ships would retreat when they should attack, then strike when retreat was expected. Alien vessels used weapons in combinations that violated safety protocols, but proved devastatingly effective. Most shocking of all was the discovery that mixed crews, humans working alongside aliens, performed better than any single species unit ever had. A human captain might have the adaptability to change tactics mid-battle, but an alien navigator could calculate jump coordinates that no human could manage. Together, they achieved things that neither could accomplish alone. Captain Turner, commanding the first officially mixed-species crew in galactic history, found himself working seamlessly with beings he had been taught to see as inferior or dangerous. His Krillian weapons officer brought warrior instincts that complemented Turner's strategic training. His Valdari engineer could feel the ship's systems in ways that enhanced human technical knowledge. "It's like we're not separate species anymore," Turner reported to General Mitchell. "We're something new." But the real breakthrough came when Dr. Adams made a discovery that would change everything. While analyzing captured Confederation data, she found the truth about the first civilization that had created the Codex. "Ryan," she called over the secure channel, "you need to see this. The first civilization wasn't destroyed by chaos. They were destroyed by order." The files were ancient, hidden in the deepest layers of Confederation archives. They told the story of a species remarkably similar to humans, creative, chaotic, constantly growing and changing. But as their civilization advanced, they became obsessed with perfection. They began creating rules to eliminate uncertainty, regulations to prevent failure, codes to ensure optimal outcomes. Slowly, generation by generation, they regulated away everything that made them alive. They eliminated risk, but also eliminated discovery. They prevented war, but also prevented growth. They achieved perfect order, and in doing so, achieved perfect death. They didn't transcend, Dr. Adams explained to the assembled fleet commanders. They stagnated themselves into extinction. The Codex isn't wisdom, it's a suicide note. This revelation spread through the Free Thought Alliance like wildfire. On world after world, beings who had been taught to revere the first civilization began to question everything they had been told. Young aliens who had tasted human-style freedom refused to return to the old ways. The Confederation's response was predictable and brutal. Veltar declared a state of galactic emergency and began implementing Protocol Zero on any world that showed signs of chaos infection. Entire civilizations were sterilized, their populations replaced with genetically modified versions that couldn't think rebellious thoughts. But something had changed in the galaxy. For the first time in 50,000 years, beings were choosing death over conformity. Instead of surrendering when Confederation fleets arrived, worlds fought back. Instead of accepting correction, populations fled to join the Free Thought. Alliance General Mitchell found himself commanding not just a fleet, but a mobile civilization. Refugee ships from dozens of worlds joined the Alliance, bringing knowledge, skills, and most importantly, hope. The turning point came during the Battle of Nexus Prime itself. The Confederation had never imagined that anyone would dare attack their capital, the symbol of galactic order. Their defenses were perfect according to the Codex, but the Free Thought Alliance didn't attack according to the Codex. Led by Captain Morrison in a daring assault, human and alien ships struck at the Confederation's historical archives, not to destroy them, but to broadcast their contents to the entire galaxy. What they found changed everything. The archives contained records of hundreds of species that had been corrected over the millennia. Each one had developed human-like traits, creativity, emotional expression, the ability to question established order. And each one had been systematically destroyed and rebuilt. But more shocking was the discovery of the true origin of the Codex. It hadn't been created by the first civilization as wisdom for future generations. It had been created as a desperate attempt to save their dying culture by forcing others to repeat their mistakes. The Confederation isn't maintaining galactic civilization, Morrison broadcast to every world in known space. They're spreading a disease. A disease that turns living beings into perfect, beautiful corpses. The broadcast reached billions of beings across the galaxy simultaneously. On Confederation worlds, young aliens who had never heard of concepts like choice or growth suddenly learned that alternatives existed. On controlled planets, populations that had been genetically modified to prevent rebellious thoughts began experiencing something their creators thought impossible: hope. The response was immediate and galaxy-wide. Revolts broke out on Confederation worlds. Modified populations began spontaneously developing the forbidden ability to question authority. Most shocking of all, some Confederation officials themselves began defecting to the Alliance. But Veltar's final message carried a threat. that made even the optimistic humans pause. If the galaxy chooses chaos over order, then the galaxy will burn. Protocol Omega is now authorized. All worlds, all species, all life will be sterilized and rebuilt according to perfect design. Better a dead galaxy than a chaotic one. Dr. Adams, analyzing Confederation fleet movements, realized the full horror of what was coming. They're not just targeting rebel worlds anymore, they're planning to sterilize everything. Every planet, every species, every trace of life in the galaxy. Then they'll rebuild it all from genetic templates designed to be perfectly obedient. General Mitchell looked out at his fleet, thousands of ships from dozens of species, all united by the simple desire to remain alive and free. How long do we have? The sterilization fleets will reach the outer rim worlds in 72 hours. After that, they'll work their way inward until they reach Earth and the core Confederation worlds. And after they sterilize the galaxy, Dr. Adams consulted her data. According to their projections, they'll use stored genetic templates to repopulate everything over the next 1,000 years. But the new populations will be incapable of independent thought, creativity, or growth. Perfect order, forever. Captain Turner spoke up from his position. Then we stop them. President Elena Rodriguez stood in the command center of New Terra Station, watching real-time displays showing battles across the galaxy. 3 years had passed since the Great Awakening began, and the Free Thought Alliance had grown from a handful of rebel ships to a force that controlled half the known galaxy. Status report. She called to Ambassador Chris Johnson, who was coordinating with alien governments that had overthrown their Confederation overseers. The Void Swarm has been completely defeated, Chris reported with satisfaction. It turns out that once Confederation fleets started using adaptive tactics instead of rigid formations, the swarm couldn't predict their movements anymore. The last nest was destroyed yesterday by a joint human-Krillian task force. Dr. Maria Santos looked up from her research station, where she worked alongside scientists from 12 different species. President, we've completed the analysis of Confederation technology. Most of their equipment is thousands of years more advanced than ours, but it's all locked into predetermined functions. We've been modifying it to allow for creative applications. Elena nodded, then turned to the main display showing the current state of the galaxy. Green areas represented Free Thought Alliance territory, where species were learning to cooperate while maintaining their unique cultures. Red areas showed remaining Confederation strongholds where Veltar's forces still enforce the ancient codex. What's the situation with the core worlds? Ambassador Johnson pulled up detailed reports. 17 core Confederation worlds have declared independence in the last month. Their populations are mostly young beings who grew up hearing stories about the Alliance. They want the freedom to choose their own futures. But Elena's expression remained troubled. And Veltar? Still, holed up in the original Nexus Prime with Loyalist forces. Intelligence suggests he's building something called the Convergence device. Dr. Santos frowned. What kind of device? Unknown, but the name suggests he's still trying to force galactic unity. We need to assume it's a weapon. Elena was interrupted by an urgent communication from Captain Morrison, now commanding the Alliance's First Contact Division. His face appeared on the main screen, and he was smiling broadly. President Rodriguez, you need to hear this. We've made contact with a species from outside the galaxy. They call themselves the Wanderers, and they've been observing Confederation space for millennia. Outside the galaxy? Elena leaned forward. How is that possible? A new voice spoke, translated through sophisticated equipment. We are Captain, Wanderer who seeks new stories. Our people left this galaxy 50,000 years ago when the Great Stagnation began. We have been waiting for someone to break the cycle. Elena felt her heart race. You knew about the Confederation's control? We knew about the first civilization's mistake. They were our allies once, before they chose death in order over life in chaos. We offered to help them, but they refused to listen. So we left, hoping that someday someone would learn from their failure. Dr. Santos stepped forward. What can you tell us about the Convergence device? It is Veltar's final attempt to achieve the first civilization's goal. He plans to use it to force every living mind in the galaxy into perfect synchronization. No more individual thoughts, no more conflicting ideas, no more chaos. Every being will think identical thoughts and feel identical emotions. That's not order, Elena whispered. That's the death of consciousness itself. Indeed, but the device has a weakness. It requires total galactic cooperation to function. If even one world refuses to connect to the network, the entire system fails. Ambassador Johnson immediately understood the implications. That's why he's been so desperate to eliminate all free-thinking worlds. He needs complete control to make his device work. Over the following weeks, intelligence reports confirmed their worst fears. Veltar's remaining forces were being pulled back to defend a massive construction project in the galactic core. The convergence device was real, and it was nearly complete. But the alliance had grown stronger than anyone could have imagined. Dr. Santos had successfully developed new technologies that combined human creativity with alien precision. Ships that could adapt their configurations in real time, weapons that learned from each battle, communication systems that allowed instant coordination across species barriers. More importantly, they had learned to govern without destroying diversity. The adaptive accords, drafted by President Rodriguez and refined by representatives from over 200 worlds, created the first truly multi-species democracy in galactic history. The key principle, Elena explained to the Galactic Assembly, is that rules should serve life, not the other way around. When a rule stops helping people grow and thrive, it's time to change the rule. The final battle came when Veltar activated the convergence device prematurely, desperate to stop the Alliance's advance. The device sent out waves of neural control signals, attempting to override the free will of every conscious being in the galaxy. For a terrifying moment, it seemed to work. On Alliance worlds, people stopped moving, their eyes becoming blank as the device tried to force their minds into conformity. But then something unexpected happened. The diversity that the Confederation had tried so hard to eliminate became the Alliance's salvation. Different species' brains worked in different ways. What could control a Zephyrian mind had no effect on Krelian consciousness. What could override Valdari thoughts couldn't touch human creativity. Instead of being controlled, the mixed species, crews of Alliance ships, found themselves naturally resistant to the device's effects. Humans whose brains were wired for chaos helped their alien crewmates break free from the control signals. Aliens whose minds worked in ways humans couldn't understand provided thoughts that were completely immune to the device's programming. Captain Turner, commanding the Alliance flagship during the final assault on Nexus Prime, found his mixed-species crew working together in ways that even they hadn't thought possible. It's like the device is trying to play a song, but we're all instruments it doesn't know how to tune, his Valdari navigator explained. The breakthrough came when Dr. Santos realized that they could turn the device's own power against itself. Instead of fighting the neural signals, we redirect them. Use the device's own network to spread the concept of choice to every mind it's trying to control. What followed was the most audacious plan in galactic history. Alliance scientists working with newly arrived Wanderer technology hijacked the convergence device's signals. Instead of sending commands for obedience, they broadcast a simple message to every conscious mind in the galaxy: you have the right to choose. The effect was instantaneous and irreversible. Across Confederation space, beings who had lived their entire lives following orders suddenly realized they didn't have to. Modified populations whose genes had been altered to prevent rebellion discovered that choice was stronger than programming. Even the loyalist forces defending Veltar began questioning their orders. Veltar's final transmission was filled with rage and incomprehension. This is impossible. Perfect order cannot be defeated by chaos. The Codex contains all truth. Obedience is survival. Elena Rodriguez, speaking for the Alliance, broadcast her response to the galaxy. The Codex was written by people who were afraid to live. We choose to live, to grow, to change, to become something better than we were yesterday. And we choose to let others make that choice for themselves. The war ended not with a battle, but with a choice. When Veltar's own forces laid down their weapons and asked to join the Alliance, the last bastion of the old order simply collapsed. 5 years later, Elena stood in the same command center, but the displays now showed a galaxy transformed. Hundreds of species worked together on projects that no single race could have imagined. Art that combined Sylvani organic growth with Krillian geometric precision, music that blended human emotion with Valdari mathematical harmony, sciences that pushed the boundaries of what was possible by refusing to accept what was proper. Ambassador Johnson approached with the day's reports. President, the latest batch of new species discoveries. 3 civilizations that were hidden in deep space during the Confederation era have made contact. They want to join the alliance. Dr. Santos added her own news. The joint research projects are exceeding all projections. When you combine different ways of thinking instead of trying to make everyone think the same way, innovation explodes. But the most satisfying report came from Captain Morrison, now head of the Education Exchange Program. Elena, you should see the schools on the frontier worlds. Children from 6 different species learning together, playing together, creating things that adults couldn't dream of. They don't see differences as problems to be solved. They see them as tools to be used. Elena smiled as she watched the displays showing trade routes that connected species that had never spoken before the alliance. Research stations where beings shared knowledge freely, and worlds where different civilizations lived together while maintaining their unique cultures. What's our next challenge? She asked. Chris Johnson pointed to the edge of the galactic map. The Wanderers have told us about other galaxies out there. Some have fallen into the same trap the Confederation did in perfect order that killed growth. Others